So let's get to 2020 then. So what are you, Douglas Lain, hoping for in 2020? We got an election coming up.
Well, I have to confess that despite my sectarian Marxism, I have become a Bernie bro. I consider myself to be part of the online horde. That is
Me too.
Yeah, yeah. I am definitely hopeful about the prospects of a Sanders nomination and then a Sanders victory. I don't have utter confidence that that's in the bag. I think that that beating Trump is going to be harder than anyone might anticipate, even for someone like Bernie Sanders.
Well, I think that Bernie and I think Bernie would beat Trump. I don't think it would be like a landslide by any means, but not only do I think that Bernie, could definitely beat Trump, I think he is the only candidate who has a chance.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I don't know how good that chance is. And I looked at the Corbyn. I thought Corbyn was going to beat Boris Johnson, right? And he lost it was a historic loss for the Labour Party. So that did give me pause. I mean, we don't have the same conditions here that they had there. Brexit isn't weighing down the Sanders campaign. I think Sanders is a better candidate than Corbyn was.
I think Sanders he is more popular than Jeremy Corbyn was overall. I mean, in many ways, like the parallels there, but Sanders is more popular than Jeremy Corbyn. And I think a lot of it would kind of diminish Corbyn wasn't Corbyn's ideas. It was all the cowtailing he had to do to Labor, which, Labor itself wasn't particularly popular. And because they didn't have that cohesion, they didn't really pull off a victory.
I worry that the Russiagate stuff is going to hurt him, not because people are going to think he's Putin's puppet, but because he's going to seem to waffle about his acceptance of that narrative. Like on the one hand, he's going to try to brush it off as irrelevant, which I think it is. And on the other hand, he might try to posture as, a warrior against Putin and take these stories more seriously than they warrant. I sort of think Tulsi Gabbard was right about it's really the U.S. intelligence community and not Russia that's interfering in our election when they push these kinds of stories.
I fully agree with that. I agree with everything you just said. And what I wish she would have done is I wish she just would have been like, it's okay if you're going to say like the diplomatic presidential thing that like, oh, foreign interference, that's not a good thing. We don't want that in our elections. All right. That's fine. The general voter likes hearing that stuff. That's cool. But then all you have to do is just be like, gee, it's kind of weird. If Putin loves Trump so much and if Russia loves Trump so much, why are they also helping out me, the guy who polls best against Trump? Maybe, just maybe, this is all just fluff. Say that in a flowery presidential way.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's right. And but overall, I am very hopeful about Sanders' possibilities here and for there to be a kind of a resurgence of social democratic leftist politics in America. And I see my job as trying to figure out how those kinds of changes in American politics could help a deeper socialist project. I don't think it's at all, we can't take it for granted that getting Medicare for all is just an obvious stepping stone on the way to overcoming the value form, as I would put it, or overcoming the exploitation of workers. To put it more kind of.
But it's definitely a nice step. I mean, it's definitely a nice step because something like Medicare for all, you take away a lot of people are tethered to very exploitive jobs because they need it for their health care.
I just look around to Europe and see that has existed for quite a long time.
Sure.
And the capitalist class still has a stranglehold. And, I talked to leftists in Sweden, for instance, who were talking about how neoliberalism has had its way, even in Sweden. I mean, it's different. They do have a deeper social safety net, but nonetheless, there's still poverty. There's still problems with immigration. There's still many ways in which the Swedish state oppresses working class movements, let alone the rise of overturning capitalism.
Sure.
So it's a complicated, it's not going to be.
Yeah. It's not like, oh, we've gotten utopia because now everyone, but
Right.
it's like it's a
The
big
struggle continues even after Bernie.
Right. Well, and even if we, like I always tell people, I'm like, okay, if Bernie gets cheated again, of course it's yellow vest time. If Bernie doesn't get cheated again, we're too loud that they can't stifle us this time, and he goes on and he wins the nomination. We get to celebrate for 2 days. Then it's yellow vest time. I mean, Bernie's only going to be as effective as the movement that's behind him, because he is going to face opposition in Congress. He's going to face opposition from the media. He's going to face opposition from the military-industrial complex. Like, he's going to have to be able to point to us. He's going to be able to have to point to the people and be like, this is what we want to get done. And that's the only way it's going to be an effective presidency.
Well, I totally agree with you. I do think that if he wins the nomination, rather than yellow vests, we might want to put on suits and ties and go out and try to. but nonetheless,
maybe we need a little bit of both. We might need a little bit of both.
All right. I am 100% behind you that not only is it important to continue to be active in order to go beyond the social democratic horizon, just to achieve the Medicare for all, or the elimination of Taft-Hartley, or getting rid of the card check, or a dozen different really nice programs and policies. He will need to have a lot of support, and I don't think we can expect it until after that he'll actually be able to accomplish quite a lot of what he does, until after there's some sort of change at the ballot box again in a midterm election. I think that he's going to spend the first 2 years fighting his own party and the Republicans.
Yeah.
I mean, he might be able to do some things by executive order, but we will have to, continue to transform the Democratic Party after he gets elected.
Oh, big time. Yeah. I mean, he'll be able to do some things by executive order. And also in the meantime, he'll be able to just kind of point the finger and be like, okay, these are some of the people holding this up. These are some of the Democrats that aren't for Medicare for all. These are some, and just sort of like, all right, we gotta try to get these people out of office. and we need to, I think that we really need to act locally too, because I really feel like the type of change we need can only happen one community at a time.
Can we pretend that we're on the Jimmy Dore show for just a minute? Because here's what I want to say.
I suppose.
Do you know what the hell is going on with these blue check marks, these media establishment types who are they just, did they get some sort of brain rot? Do you get over $1 million a year and you lose IQ points? Because it seems to me like right now, what they ought to be doing is embracing Bernie Sanders.
Sure.
They ought to not be exposing themselves this way. If they want to rein him in, this is a time to come in for the clinch and say, "Oh, you're one of our boys after all."
Mm-hmm. Why do you think they're not doing that?
I don't know. This is what I'm asking you. Look, I'm just a dipshit comedian. I don't know.
I think it's that I mean, first of all, like, I think a lot of people in the corporate media are just there because they're just really good at reading a prompter. I think Chuck Todd. I think calling Chuck Todd a reporter is funnier than anything any comedian could ever write. I mean, I think that guy is a C-level actor who does a very good, or at least a good enough job playing a newscaster. That's exactly what he is. I don't think he's ever had an original thought go through his head. I don't think he's ever, been able to form an opinion without a note card in front of him telling him what to read or what to do.
Well, what about these people who are on Twitter with the blue check marks that are actually writing things, that they don't just read the teleprompters, but they write like
these things? Who pays?
Yeah, I know. Oh, I know. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. It's just, they will publish the most ridiculous. They being, the New York Times, the Washington Post. If you want to smear Bernie, there is absolutely no, journalistic. I mean, they've published stuff smearing Bernie where the source was just a couple anonymous people claiming they heard a conversation. i.e. the Liz Warren fiasco. So really, you know, if you want an opportunity in the corporate media, you know, smearing Bernie is still your ticket to a big paycheck, whereas embracing Bernie is kind of your ticket to, you know, getting fired or just having to build a big following on your own independently. I mean, Ed Schultz got fired just for wanting to cover Bernie. That climate has not changed at all. So I would say that's why these corporate mouthpieces aren't embracing Bernie Sanders. That's not who signs the paycheck. It doesn't matter that that's where public opinion is. And that's why, you know, our media structure shouldn't be legal.
Right. I think that the other side of it, though, is like the DNC and the Democratic establishment. And I, again, look at like Tom Perez or even Elizabeth Warren and say, why aren't you guys figuring it out that the best way to beat Bernie Sanders is to play politics with him when he's in power rather than to expose yourself as corrupt, you know, during the primary process, right? Rather than a brokered convention, which will just destroy your own party and really put you on the outs in the not even the long term, but like the near long term.
Do you think if it happens, if they steal he wins, you know, the popular vote and they steal the nomination from him anyway via the second ballot where the superdelegates kick in? Do you think if that happens, that would be the end of the Democratic Party?
I think it will very likely create a significant enough split that the Democratic Party as it is will have real difficulties getting people elected for a long time, and that it will create a space for some sort of new social democratic party. I think that's likely. I also think that these people are chicken. They're all talk and they're no action. There's no way that they're actually going to do this in do a brokered convention. They'd have to actually, some of them would actually have to take a personal political hit.
Well, do you think it's fair to say that their first priority isn't necessarily win? By they, I mean the Democratic establishment, the Tom Perez's, the Nancy Pelosi's, the people you've been mentioning. Is it fair to say that their first priority isn't winning? Because that's what I say. I say their first priority, and by the way, there's clips on MSNBC where people basically say this in not so many words. Their first priority
no doubt about it, that they would. I mean, beating Trump isn't even the primary problem with brokered convention. Obviously, a brokered convention and putting up, I don't know, who are they talking about? Michelle Obama?
That was the thing this morning. Yeah, it was Sherrod Brown, right? Like he was gonna Michelle was gonna be the VP.
I mean, obviously that's not gonna happen, but even if it's like someone a little bit more realistic, like I don't know, they give it to Mitt Romney. No, sorry, I'm thinking of 2016. But they give it to some sort of in the back. John Kerry. Let's say they just bring John Kerry in, who was thinking about running anyway, and they give it to none of the candidates, or they give it to Biden. That seems very unlikely given Biden's mental state. But let's say that they gave it to Biden. There's no chance at all that whoever comes out that way is going to be able to beat Trump. Trump will use that, will set that on fire, hang that around their neck, and walk through till November. He will definitely beat any candidate that comes out of that brokered convention.
Big time. That's why I said their first priority is not winning. Their first priority is making the donors happy. So it's like, well, why aren't they joining Bernie Sanders? Well, they want to make the donors happy.
Right. But
they want to keep that gravy train flowing.
Yeah. But I mean, by 2024, will there be much of a Democratic Party left for people to donate to? You know, you can end up in Biden's position where you're just not viable anymore, and that money dries up for another reason. So I don't know. I think it's very dumb for them to be publicly talking about a brokered convention this way, but you know.
So they're in between a rock and a hard place then, where it's like, well, if we kind of join Bernie Sanders, we're really going to make the donor class upset. And we're really going to kind of disrupt our apple cart and our way of doing business, because it would be better for us to just lose to Trump again. When you think about it. However, on the same note, now our mask is kind of off and people are kind of seeing us for what we are. So what we face the danger of doing what we just described in the short term, when the long term, we might not have a leg to stand on anymore.
Right. But I think they have to what they're underestimating, I think, ultimately is the American public and the constituency behind Bernie Sanders. They think because I mean, it wasn't so long ago.
Are you implying Tom Perez and his people don't have their thumb on the pulse of the American people?
Yeah, that's right.
You're a traitor, Douglas.
Well, I mean, but it wasn't very long ago the Democratic Party kind of played these backroom deals and brokered conventions on the regular. I mean,
sure.
It wasn't until after 1968 that there was a move towards making the primary process more democratic. So, you know, and I was watching a clip from an old Dunes. Who's the guy who did Doonesbury? Anyway, an old series about the primaries called Tanner 88. You remember? Have you ever heard of this show?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so it was on HBO.
You probably give me a good list of stuff that I need to check out, especially especially like the sci-fi.
The old guys remember the 80s.
No. I mean, you're hip to subgenres that I am just not hip to.
Well, Tanner
was sci-fi and stuff like that. Like I'm just not hip to a lot of that stuff, and I'd like to be.
Well, Tanner was not a science fiction thing. It was like a mock documentary about the campaign trail in 1988, following a fictional primary candidate in the Democratic primaries called Tanner. And he would, the gimmick of it was he would actually go to the states where primaries were happening and mingle with the other candidates as if he was really one of them. And like, you know, they filmed on the convention floor and all of that. And in that documentary, Tanner got enough delegates that he was trying to broker the convention to get and get Jesse Jackson to help him get the nomination. Or I don't remember if it's that or help get Jesse to get the nomination. But, you know, there was a lot of backroom stuff going on in the Tanner 88 documentary. No, that didn't happen in reality, but he was not the bad guy. He was the progressive hero in this documentary. So the brokered convention, the reason why it's so terrible now is because, well, one, we've become more and more accustomed over the years to a more democratic primary process, and also because of the popularity of Bernie Sanders. He really does represent something beyond status quo politics. It used to be you had an electorate that was mostly checked out. It was really mostly kind of a party affair. Who the nominee would be. People didn't check in. They weren't watching every primary debate.
Well, I think the way I like to describe it too is I'm just like, look, as somebody who, you know, before the Iraq War, I personally wasn't, you know, I wasn't really awake politically. Like when I was in high school, I just, my concern was just playing in punk bands and whatever. I didn't really have opinions really on politics. And then the Iraq War happened. I went away to college. I read a guy named Noam Chomsky, and then the floodgates were open. And, you know, to me, it was like, you know, I never felt some kinship with the Democratic Party. I just realized, you know, like, well, they weren't the Republicans. And, you know, my point of view isn't necessarily reflected on the ballot, but this is, you know, at least maybe a slower way to get to the type of society I'd like to see. And then what 2016 did, and you know, and I'm sure a lot of people were, you know, cognizant of this before I was, but I think for 2016, for a lot of people, you know, especially people my age and younger, and just people that maybe, you know, had a similar perspective, 2016 just confirmed all of our worst suspicions. Like all of our worst suspicions about how our politics really works and about what the Democratic Party really is. All of our worst suspicions and then some were confirmed in 2016 when we went backwards. And for those of us who in 2008, you know, we supported Dennis Kucinich because we knew Obama was kind of just a moderate and wasn't the sharp change we needed. But we were like, oh, okay, well, he'll push us in a better direction and then we'll get further and stuff like that. All of our worst suspicions were confirmed from 2008 to 2016, and then especially in the election 2016. And we realized that, you know, if you're a lefty, the Democratic Party does not have room for you in their supposed wide tent. Who do they have room for? Anti-choice people like Tim Kaine. They got room for that, but they don't have room for you.
Yeah. I came out of, you know, I moved to Portland when I was 20, and I've been here ever since. And I kind of, for me, what made me break from traditional politics and become kind of a committed leftist was the first Iraq War, the Desert Storm in 1991. And, you know, I then saw Bill Clinton run against George Bush as someone who wouldn't outright condemn that invasion, which was to me an illegal invasion and an atrocity. And so it was as early as 91 that where I was thinking, well, and watching Bill Clinton get elected, where I thought, well, this, the Democratic Party is not for me. I haven't voted Democrat.
Really? I mean,
election.
He played the saxophone and everything. That didn't do it.
Yeah, I know. There were a lot of people around me who were saying that, given that Bill Clinton was a black man, I should be supportive of him. But wasn't he our first black president? But in any case, I didn't like him. And then since then, I hadn't voted for a Democrat in any election except for John Kerry I hated George W. Bush so much that I wanted to get him out the door, and I held my nose for John Kerry and then felt really dirty afterwards. But but this time around, I don't know if I'm getting weak in my old age or if really Bernie Sanders is very, very different. I think it's the second thing. I've actually registered as a Democrat. So not only will I vote for him in the general, I'm actually going to vote in the primaries. Scratched out Socialist, wrote in Democrat to vote for him in Oregon, even as I'm, talking, try to talk on my own channel about how we have to go beyond the social democratic horizon. Like I cannot stave off the Bernie bro position and the love of of this moment. So
get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your